Welcome to Beyond Borders podcast, our first episode where we talk about anything when it comes to entrepreneurship, AI, digital, Web3, and much more, including mental health. Today, we have two great co-hosts who will always be there. One is Caroline Hammond, which is a visionary artist, a regular X-Space host, a community builder, and explores identity, energy, and empowerment from everyone who joins her. And also Sprenko, who is a wider creative mental health consultant and a founder of the Real Talk Hub. And today we will talk about Web3, the status of Web3, what Web3 is, how it evolves, what the risks are, what the opportunities are, and how we can go further into the future with Web3. First of all, I would like to ask Carolyn, what is your experience within Web3? And if you can give a small explanation what Web3 is.
Okay, thank you, Pim. I think when I first stepped into Web3, it felt very much like stepping into uncharted territory. In some respects, it's the unknown, isn't it? But it was also, and still is, I think, a space brimming with possibility, but also uncertainty. For me, the past 2 years that I've been involved have been a journey of discovery, adaptation, transformation, not just in terms of Web3 itself, but for me as an artist navigating the space. And if we're talking about what is Web3, there will be people listening thinking, what is it? What is it all about? And I think we question that often, don't we, in the chats that we have on X and the spaces. But I think, it's a part of the internet, isn't it? It's a growing part of the internet. And whether it will emerge as the next iteration of the internet, I think personally remains to be seen. But for now, it's certainly the focus of decentralization, blockchain technology, and user ownership of data and assets. I think that kind of sums it up in a nutshell. And I think we'll talk more about this over the time that we're doing this podcast. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, and I agree. Definitely, it's a territory that's quite unknown even for us, even though we've been doing it for years now. And what about you, Sprenko? What is your main experience when it comes to Web3, and what do you think will be needed to lead it in the correct way?
Thank you, Tim. For me, Web3 is, beyond the general concept of just a decentralized space, where everybody can have autonomy and control their respective data and information. For me, it's a space, a hub where everybody has the freedom to create, explore, and tap into new technologies that can, better respective aspects of our lives, span from art, mental health, creativity, AI tools, and everything you can possibly imagine. I believe we are still scratching the surface. So I love that we're having this conversation today, and I believe that the more we dive deep into it, we'll see different aspects of Web3 that we can explore individually and benefit collectively.
Yeah, and what do you think that the current main point is, Carolyn, that Sprenko just mentioned?
I think it was interesting as I was listening to Sprenko, I was thinking about the beginning of Web3, the hype, the whole furore around NFT drops and experimentation. It was exciting, like a melting pot of people and ideas and hope and inspiration, and I think in those days, back in the day, and it's not that long ago really, but because of the fast pace of Web3, it seems like it is, but I think artists and creatives were finding their voice. Collectors were exploring new ways to engage, and everything moved at such a fast pace. There was this raw energy, I think, and almost rebellious creativity, where traditional art norms were being redefined. And I think they still are, but it isn't as palpable as it was back in the day, I think. Exciting, but chaotic. And like Sprenker said, I think over time the space has matured. The focus has shifted from quick flips to long-term value, at least for some of us, and storytelling and utility is important. Value, adding value in the space is something I know we all share. Artists, I think, and I'm speaking as an artist, obviously, we are trying to build sustainable careers in the space, and it isn't easy because we are carving out a new space, aren't we? Does that make sense?
Yes, I think many things are getting more defined in the last couple of months. Definitely, when you look at the negative impacts the space also has seen in the last years, people are really pushing the positive parts and really mentioning that is the only part that we currently want to see. We're building on a big thing that people many times say on the feeds in the web, that they are builders and that we are building with each other and for each other, to expand on a Web3 narrative. I also agree that when you look at the rebelliousness that was in the past, that it's more slimmed down and people are more looking what are the real opportunities. And of course, doing the ETFs also is getting a little bit less decentralized, when the big banks are including themselves within the overall blockchain industry, which is also a good thing. But that's for some builders has some negative impacts, that they are not really working on the same message they did a couple of years ago. But what they still do is building on the overall technology that Web3 stands for, where the main point is transparency. So everyone can have an open source information on what everyone is doing, what the financials are, and how things are getting done. I think that's a big part of the community that wants to keep that as the main narrative of the Web3. And what do you think, Spranko, is the biggest negative when it comes to mental health on Web3 and what we have seen in a couple of months? How mostly artists maybe are a little bit more burned out about the community.
Yeah, that's an interesting question, Kim, because the subject of mental health in Web3 is not far beyond what applies in the real world, right? In Web2, because that stigma is currently still associated with prioritizing mental health. You see a lot of artists, creators, founders, builders, even devs who are in this space and struggling. There's constant burnout. There's constant anxiety to create stuff, build stuff. There's this depression looming in the air, and oftentimes people want help. People want support. People want communities that would encourage them to live positive, mental health and well-being. But then there is still this um sort of rejection. You want to put one foot in and you don't want to appear like, oh, your whole world is crashing down. So with experience from the Real Talk Hub, I've got to realize that for individuals, artists, creators, whatever you are in Web3, you cannot say you want to prioritize your mental health and you know, consider 100% the opinion of what other people say. We have things like, oh, are you active right now? Or you have to grind 24/7. That doesn't work for everybody. So it's important that when we apply mental health in the three, we need to treat it as a core aspect of our lives. If we let ourselves crash because we're in Web3, it's going to affect us in our real life. So I think it's something we need to hold front and center and say, you know what, I'm living this life, whether it be Web2, Web3, I need to prioritize mental health, and that's the sum of it.
I agree, and I think finding that balance can be a little bit difficult, definitely for people who are already in the community for a long time, because there have been many disappointments, also many opportunities. Let's be fair, but finding a way how to be everywhere within the community is a difficult part. What I do like about the community is that there are spaces like Carolyn's Web3 Wednesday, uh, so everybody can have a voice. What was the start of the idea, and how did you find that you needed to connect with Web3 via the spaces, Caroline?
It was an interesting journey, Pim. Thank you for asking the question. I think I arrived in Web3, very much. I'm going to use the word embryo because that's how it felt, completely vulnerable and yeah, not knowing anything but also hungry to learn. And so I found myself in this space that was essentially alien. The language was alien. I didn't know, the language, what was being said, how it was being said. The technology was beyond me at that time. There was a huge gap, and I think there was for many of us entering the space this huge gap between where we are and our real lives, as Sprenko mentioned, and getting into and being comfortable with Web3. So when I arrived, I did what a lot of people do. I joined the community. And, not deliberately, I kind of fell upon one and ended up talking to people there. And at the time, they were encouraging us to start spaces, to connect with people, to build our networks. And, there was a formulaic approach to how you would, integrate yourself into Web3 on Twitter back in the day. And that was encouraged. And I don't really, if I'm honest, I don't really think I understood at that point what I was doing, what I was getting into, and what the driver was. There was myself, as you know, and a lady called Daniela who started it off together. We were a team probably for about 8 months before Daniela went off and did something else. We kind of decided that we wanted to educate, to help people through their Web3 journey with the struggles that we had faced. And that was really the motivator. I think that core has remained, that core driver for me and for the team around Web3 Wednesday remains. It's about sharing stories, sort of learning through other people's tales of woe and also, tales of success. So I think that has maintained, but I think also it is truly Web3 Wednesday about the growing community of like-minded souls. Does that kind of fit for you? You know us really well, so what do you think?
Yeah, well, I think that's the major strength of your overall X space. When you see who is returning, it has been increasing over the years, also in the overall chat, that people actually helping each other with all kinds of stuff and also having fun just on a regular basis. And I think that's a big part of the community that always stands out in what you have created in the spaces, in the chat, on the overall feeds. I also noticed it for my own, let's say, account. People who I were interacting with on your Web3 space or in the community chat, they will keep coming back on my own feed. And also, I will keep coming back on their feed because you build connections with people you can discuss things with. You see great things from, great art, great initiatives, great projects. Same way for you as Branko. And how can you actually help each other is a big part which I really like. And maybe Sprenko can agree with that as well.
Absolutely. I agree that, coming into Web3 can be, sort of a, stumbler. You just find yourself in the space, you find yourself in the community. I think that's how, a bunch of us started out. But, one thing I want to, throw to both of you is we, you know, we know for a fact that we cannot talk about Web3 without talking about crypto, right? And now the question that has been on my mind for the longest time is, we know the nature of the market we're in right now. The state of the space is on an all-time, low right now. But the question that's been on my mind, which I want to pose to both of you, is with the current trend, how Bitcoin is down, I think around the 7,200s thereabout. Um, Ethereum as well under 2K. You know, is that a good thing is that an opportunity for NFTs to pick up again, have the concept of blue chips and the like, and have, maybe even smaller NFT projects, get that leverage to boom, because now entry points are pretty low. If you had an NFT that you wanted to get for zero point 0.1 ETH, that was probably around $300. Now it's around 180, right? So is it an opportunity, for an aspect of Web3, which is the NFT space, to leverage and grow, or is it, anything that happens to crypto then just cripples the entire space?
Well, I made a post about it, I think, yesterday or the day before, for why the stock market and crypto is down, and it can be influenced for the upcoming 6 months is because of the bonds and the possible refinancing of US debt. That it's just a speculation, that the overall price ranges of crypto will be on the lower sides in the upcoming months, which has opportunities, but also some negative effects. I think those negative effects will be that people are cutting off on Web3 because they can't pay their bills. They need to work. Of course, everyone needs to bring in money for the groceries, bills, etc. So for artists, it's gonna be a big struggle, I assume. Also, when it comes to opportunity, of course, there are opportunities for new projects that use the blockchain technology or are making NFTs to get known for a cheaper price. A big thing is that minting price will also get cheaper, which definitely for starting or lesser known artists is an opportunity. But still, I think that the big artists or the more known artists or the artists that already built a community will have the most benefits, because those are the ones that already got eyes on them and will keep the eyes on them no matter what the price of Bitcoin or Ethereum or Solana is. So yeah, I think if you want to be known as an artist and bring new NFTs, I think you still need to get people from Web2 to Web3 via social media and on a website and other projects. Then you might have some opportunity to grow in the NFT space. And of course, a little bit of luck is always welcome. But how it's going to be achieved is still a little bit of a question. I'm not sure. Maybe Caroline can go further on that.
It's a great question, and it's one where I need to park crypto for a minute to one side. Obviously, it's important, and the highs and lows and the vagaries of crypto are a factor here. But looking at this from the point of view, firstly, as an artist, for me, and anyone that engages with me knows that I see the opportunity in Web3 and have done from the beginning. And I believe that for all artists, it's unprecedented. So we have an opportunity. And what is the opportunity? Well, more and more of us can navigate this space in a way that we cannot navigate traditional art and the gatekeepers that surround it. It's next to impossible. And so this gives us space to do that, through direct engagement, ownership, monetization. There are key opportunities for artists, I think. It allows artists to sell directly to collectors without galleries or agencies. And I know we've got to get there. And often there's a gap between being collected and being an artist in the space. And that's a difficult gap sometimes. And I think Sprenko touched on that with regards to mental health. It's super important to realize your place in the space is as valid as anybody else's. We have an opportunity of as artists. NFTs, the blockchain technology allows us to prove ownership. It's like a digital stamp on what we do, and I think that's super important. It gives us a level of control that we don't have in the real world, not really. Royalties, in theory, on secondary sales, that goes in just like the music industry. So that's something that can be exciting for artists as they create and then expect to have kickbacks in the future. But the most important one for me, and in terms of Web3 Wednesday, is community building and patronage. That is unprecedented in Web3, I think. It is how it works, and people value that direct relationship with the artist. That is invaluable, and it's something that you don't really get anywhere else. So that's kind of where I'm going with it.
I think it's a great point of going. What would you like to add on it, Sprinko?
Yes, thank you, Pim. And amazing points, from both of you. And I agree that despite the vibes being low, that's one of our usual terminologies in Web3. I agree with you both that there are opportunities here. And I've been thinking, while you were speaking as well, Carl, and it just crossed my mind that initially Web3 was less about, oh, there's this new shiny space that you can make money, you know, at, and it was more about, oh, there's this new technology that makes life easier. If you wanted to build a product, you can now do it on a blockchain easier, and you can do it without having to go through a lot of bureaucratic red tape. Just do it by yourself, own it by yourself, put it to people how you want it, right? And then over a period of time, it flipped over, sort of, into a giant casino. Into, oh, it's all about the money, it's all about the money. Maybe, just maybe, this current downtrend would give us, that room to sort of sit back and reflect, and sort of rewind into that old flame, and where we categorically enjoy the space for the tech that it has to offer, for the relationships that we can build in this space, and for the wealth of fun we can enjoy. Where it's like, you're getting NFTs on art or whatever you're collecting for the love of it, because, oh, you enjoy it, you like it. I want that. And now entry points are pretty low, so it's easier to be a part of communities you've always wanted to be a part of. It's easier to collaborate with content creators that you wanted to collaborate with. People are live streaming, painting. People are, speaking in spaces. People are coming up with it. So I think, as much as the vibes are low, there's a ton of opportunities that can still be capitalized, if we just, tune out the low vibes a bit. So I really love those takes.
I love that, Sprinko. I really do. And if we could bottle that and sprinkle it around, I'm sure Web3, would be full of new blood and new opportunities. Honestly, I could almost feel your enthusiasm for the space, even though it's flat. And that is the key for me. That is how we need to infuse everybody to keep going. Because I think in these spaces, no matter how flat they are, there are opportunities, and I was thinking on the back of what I said, think about the different things and the different projects that are involved in Web3 that are supporting artists, immersive art, interactive art, dynamic NFTs, programmable art. There's stuff here that people who are not currently engaged in this have no idea about, but would harness given the opportunity. And it's that message that we need to get out there, I think. I think also for artists, there's alternative revenue streams, membership-based projects, subscriptions, token-gated access, digital collectibles. So there's more flexibility here and opportunity than people realize. Physical and digital is growing. So even traditional artists who really can't see themselves going digital, in inverted commas, can do it, can keep their physical traditional art and have the digital element, the NFT, limited edition prints, wearable art, which is something that I'm heavily involved in, AR enhanced experience. So it's bright, isn't it? The future, Pim, I think.
Yeah, I agree. And I would like to add a thing that I was thinking when you look at opportunities, that now businesses that are already in Web3 and have been using blockchain technology and art in various ways in the last years, they might be more accessible for new artists right now, or artists that want to try to do collaborations within businesses, because the market is now more down, it's more low, as Franco mentioned. But it also means that people are searching for new opportunities, including businesses. So maybe you can stand out more as an artist and contact a business. I have an idea. This is my art. I can use this type of technology to complement your product, so we can work together. I think that's a great time for doing that right now, because everybody is searching for opportunity and getting more mass adoption to Web3. And businesses are doing that on a daily basis, trying to find the next spark that can help the community, the business, also, of course, and within revenue. But I think artists might be a little bit more bold in saying, okay, OpenSea or just regular businesses, I got an idea. Do you want to work together? Yes or no? I think that's going to be happening in the upcoming months. I hope it happens as well, because there are some incredible artists out there that are not really seen or not known by name. So I hope that will work on in the upcoming months. And what would you say when you look at Web3? How are we going to get that larger adoption to the community, to the socials? What is needed? What do you think, Caroline?
It's a difficult one, Pim, I think. I think, although at the beginning of when we were talking about this, I said park crypto for a minute. We have to bring it back in when we talk about this discussion, don't we? And I think, we've long been discussing the fact that there will be big players who come into the space that bring people with them. And we've had incidents of that recently with some high profile meme coins being put out there and, people coming in, but they're not coming in for the reasons that we're discussing today. Now, does that matter? I think it does, because the motivation for being here, if it's purely crypto and trading, art and artists are not giving them, that audience, that group of people, what they want here. And I'm not sure that education would change that, or just being aware that we are here as a community would change that, because it's not the driver for them. So in the wider sense, I think the same thing kind of has to happen. I think that the space needs to manage itself better. And that's something I've been advocating for an awfully long time. Self-regulation before regulation is imposed, I think, is always the way to go, because it makes you disciplined. And so something that I think we have to do, and something I've been working on. Outside of that, I think we need to move away. We're talking about Web3 here today, and we do lots, don't we? And that, but we need to stop this distinction between Web3 and real life. Like Srenko said, it is real life, isn't it? It's where we choose to be all day, every day. And so it is life. It is our life. And so if we move away from this boundary between Web3 and real life, I think we will make it more accessible for people, instead of staying in this little Web3 crypto bubble. That's kind of my take on it.
You want to add anything, Franco?
I think Carlin has made a great point, and if there's anything I would like to add, it would be the fact that Web3 is not as enclosed as it looks. It's not a very small space, and there are no limitations. We're talking about art, NFTs, crypto. There's DeFi, there's GameFi, there's SocialFi. There's a lot of things that people can explore. So I would say that as we lead towards mass adoption, which I honestly don't think is gonna happen, immediately, or even anytime soon, because we first need to ground the people who are currently in the space. We first need to sort of be on a collective wavelength in our thinking and ensure that the space is healthy and safe for us who are currently in the space before we extend, because at the end of the day, if we solely focus on how to get more people in, we just keep pulling people in who get a bad experience and just hop right out, and it's word of mouth. Oh, I got in there, I had a bad experience, I left. And so we need to really look inwards, fine tune this place, reshape it, smoothing things out to a very good extent so that when we start putting products, ideas, business relationships, communities that, cater to the larger audience, it will be easier and a very safe space for mass to adopt and just, come in and enjoy.
Go ahead, Caroline.
You make great points, Sprenko, and you've made me ask a question. Do we think that Web3 is so you said about it, being wise, not a closed ecosystem, an expanding universe. Do we think that there's going to come a point where it is so embedded in everyday life, the technology, that we will be using it and people will be using it and engaged in it, but not actually know that it's Web3? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. I think that it makes a lot of sense when it comes from a business point. But I think there will be steps that are that visual. For example, just a point system that will eventually go to a blockchain system. I think that's just an example where people can earn points. For example, when they do something with education and finish their subject and get a grade, they get an X amount of points. That eventually will become integrated within a blockchain system, so they can spend those points on different businesses, different educational programs. Just an example. When you're going to have everything is international right now because of accessibility with internet. The blockchain can also be a way for people to check who you are in the sense of what certifications do you have. That can also be on the blockchain, which is an NFT, or can be an NFT. I think there are multiple ways. With that integrations, once that catches up, the bigger businesses will join in, and there will be more consulting that businesses and people should use it because there are benefits for revenue generating or just open source information. I think that will come eventually, but I think we're talking years. Same for when you look at Web3 right now, it's more active on Twitter and some Telegram groups, but it isn't on all the socials. Crypto is, but Web3 and what it really can do isn't. And I think that might be a good step for episode number 2, where we elaborate on this further and see where that's going to be, and where the opportunities for that and what kind of businesses will work on that. I would like to thank Caroline and Sprenko for today's podcast episode. I had a lot of fun. I hope you had as well. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow us on our socials so you're always up to date with information and when the next podcast is going to be. Again, thank you, Caroline and Sprenko, and see you next time.